This week on Trek, Marry, Kill.
Gods, galaxies, death.
Next!
Captain's log, stardate 1312.4. The next mission of the Enterprise takes us into an unknown force field which affects the destiny of my closest friend.
I understand you least of all. Gary told me that you've been friends since he joined the service, that you asked for him aboard your first command.
It is my duty, whether pleasant or unpleasant, to listen to the reports, observations, even speculations on any subject that might affect the safety of this vessel.
It's like a man who has been blind all of his life, suddenly being given sight. Sometimes I feel there's nothing I couldn't do in time. Some people think that makes me a monster, don't they, Jim?
What would you do in my place?
Kill me?
Trek, Marry, Kill.
Okay, welcome to Trek, Marry, Kill. It's Bryan.
I'm Kristen.
And today we're talking about Where No Man Has Gone Before. It's the second pilot for Star Trek, the original series. It's one of the rare times in TV history that has ever happened, where network executives looked at a pilot, said, well, it kind of sucked, but we kind of liked it too. So let's just do it again, but with some changes. They lost Jeremy Hunter as Captain Pike, or Jeffrey Hunter as Pike, and they decided, let's get someone else in here, and they got William Shatner. And they didn't just cast him as Captain Pike. He became Captain Kirk with his middle initial in flux, if you watch the episode. It aired on September 22nd, 1966. It's technically the third aired episode. And originally I thought it was because the VFX weren't complete in time. But actually the original reason was NBC thought, it's too thinky.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is very ambitious for a pilot.
Yes. I also think it's if you're teaching pilot writing, I mean, it's a very old sample. It's from the 60s, but it still does a lot of stuff that you would want to see in a pilot made today. So at the end of the day, I think it works as a piece of television too. Quick synopsis though: the Enterprise is on a mission led by Captain Kirk, and they are tasked with probing the edge of the galaxy and seeing what's beyond the galactic barrier. And on their way, they get a distress call from the SS Valiant, which had gone missing 200 years earlier, which creates a lot of weird time problems for Star Trek history. And they discover that the ship was in distress, thought lost. They find its buoy, its distress buoy with all of its records. And they find that they encountered at the edge of the galaxy a magnetic storm that caused irreparable damage to the ship and also caused some of the crew to go crazy and start killing each other. And the captain ordered his ship's own self-destruction. So with the mystery of the Valiant solved, they push ahead with their original mission. And then the Enterprise encounters the magnetic storm and they get their ass kicked. And as they're limping back, we find out two of the main cast members that were shocked, Lieutenant Gary Mitchell, Captain Kirk's friend, and Dr. Elizabeth Daner, who had just been transferred over and is the ship's psychiatrist. They were both shocked by this magnetic storm. And because they had these high Esper ratings, extrasensory perception abilities, whatever life force was in that shock that they received from the magnetic field slowly starts taking over their bodies, mainly Gary Mitchell's, and gives him the powers of a god. And he starts seeing the rest of the crew as an impediment to him ruling the galaxy. And it's up to Captain Kirk to stop him. Couple of casting notes. Shatner, again, not a recast, new character.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this episode sticks in a lot of people's minds, not for really what it's about, but because Sally Kellerman's in it.
Yeah.
She's Dr. Daner, and you've got Gary Lockwood from freaking 2001. I mean, freaking MASH, Hot Lips Houlihan for Sally Kellerman. And then you've got Gary Lockwood from 2001 in it as Gary Mitchell. That really stands out in my mind. That's certainly what I remember from this episode.
Yeah.
And a lot of other weird casting things going on. This episode sticks out in a lot of ways. First, as an episode of Star Trek, it really does establish what Star Trek's about. But versus, say, The Cage, I would say actually this episode sets up what they do later, because they really cleared the deck from all the unmemorable characters except for the ones scripted to die, because we've got Scott, we've got Sulu.
Sulu has like one line, maybe two.
Yeah, and Scott's just kind of there, and it's a weird because it is. And it isn't Star Trek in that we know, like it's clearly is, but it's still them trying to figure it out. So I thought that was interesting. Rest in peace, Lee Kelso, though. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
he gave a spirited performance.
Yeah,
kind of a good riddance, Dr. Piper. He didn't really make an impression there. So, so it was good that we got Dr. McCoy. I have a story about this episode, though, how I first saw it. And
please tell.
The reason why I will probably never forget this episode is because it's the first and only VHS I purchased that was a bootleg. And I bought it at the first and only Star Trek convention I've ever attended.
What was the quality of the bootleg? Do you remember?
I don't recall
like
there
the
being
video and audio quality.
I don't remember there being qualms with it. To be honest, it didn't really stand out to me.
What year? In the 1990s?
Yeah, and also I wasn't watching it through an antenna, so there was no fuzz. So,
so like an improvement, I guess?
So it was a slight improvement, but it was odd hearing different sound effects for certain things. And also the fonts were different, which they are if you watch, I think, the remastered edition. They're still the original fonts. But also one thing that sticks in my mind rewatching it was that the intro was different because they didn't have the formal Space the Final Frontier. So it was Captain Kirk going on about like space law.
Yeah.
and so go ahead.
No, and also it seemed, the one I watched, it seemed like some of the graphics have been replaced, or some of the special effects, right?
Right, yes.
It looked way too good for 1966.
Well, they certainly, for the remaster, they redid that one too. But watching the bootleg, they were still in the, those were the first VFX that those are the first effects they did for Star Trek. So even to I think I was 11 by then, maybe 12, watching it still looked rough, even for what I knew the original series was, because these were like literally the first shots of the Enterprise. And so it came in a yellow box. Those, do you remember the ones that you like open like a book? They clip open the plastic.
I don't think I do.
And it had, this is my modern.
Like the padded ones, like the Disney ones?
So it would open like a Disney one, but it wasn't as puffy. So it was just kind of like one of those black plastic cases, and they slipped in some art, which was yellow.
But it was a yellow case.
Or the case was black. What they used was yellow.
Okay, so you're just
paper.
talking about like the traditional bootleg, or like the
there we go. That's
non-blockbuster video store would have, like when they rent out videos, those types. Yes.
And I would imagine it was very good quality because they would have probably put SP as the recording. As the recording speed. That's, if anyone doesn't know, there's like standard play and extended play for your VHS tapes. And I think if you used EP, you could record up to 6 hours on a tape. Yeah. So that was good for if you needed to get multiple episodes. So I think it was just the one episode. And it was interesting. I think I remember watching it going, this is interesting. It almost felt like it was a bootleg episode of the show. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't quite Star Trek, but it was in fact the pilot. So that's my memory of it.
Do you remember how much you paid for this?
I'm gonna say it was $20.
That's a lot, I feel.
But I think that was still like the going price.
That was $1990.
Yeah, $1990. But I think that was still the going price for a new tape. You know what? Now that I'm saying it, I think it might have been closer to $30. But I also recall that that was maybe the only thing I got at the convention. So that was my
you get one thing and this is the thing you wanted.
Yeah, because I think I was choosing, by the way, my dad made me the costume I was wearing. It looked really bad, but it was a Next Generation one. It was a Next Generation one, but I was attracted to all the original series stuff. And so I got this bootleg, but it was the other thing I had wanted was a flip open communicator that when you flipped it open, it lit up and it made the sound. And
that
I've
had to be
never
more than
forgotten.
$30. Though,
No,
right?
that was like $130.
Yeah.
So it's like it was choosing between this and that, and I just got the.
Yeah. My parents would not have bought me the $130 flip thing, and like my mom likes Star Trek. She'd been like, absolutely not.
Yeah, no, it's a good call.
This is gonna break tomorrow.
That's right. Yeah, I just remember it felt like the real thing, like the genuine article. So and so now that's my little detour. Hopefully we'll do something like that for every episode, how we first came upon it, if there's any sort of special story or anything like that. So not putting you on the spot, by the way.
Okay.
Okay, but did you have any stray thoughts or about the episode that doesn't fall into our grading system?
So for me, and this is more of the series in general, was that, well, number one, like, are these the original graphics? But we already covered that. But number two, this show is as horny or hornier than I remember. Like, I was like, there's no way I actually read it that is that horny. It is, if not more so. And this is the pilot, or the aired pilot. I that actually surprised me a little bit, because I thought there's no way I'm actually like remembering that, because that's like the stereotype of the original series, of it just being like William Shatner banging aliens the whole time. Although that doesn't happen here, but it's very horny. This is pretty bad, but remember that meme that's been going around where it's like the magic wands is like the warp drives on the Enterprise? I couldn't stop seeing that the whole episode, when every time they show the updated Enterprise, and I feel that's really bad, and we probably should just take it out. But I couldn't unsee it.
The image she's referring to is
we'll share it.
Is an image of the Enterprise's nacelles replaced with magic wands, vibrators.
Yes. Marital aids.
It fits in pretty nicely.
It is perfect. I cannot unsee it.
My comment was the Enterprise V, but I'm sure there's a better joke there. Anyway, I also wanted to point this out. We're going to try to pull, snippets from, the ephemera, the facts, all the stuff that's been written about Star Trek over the years. This is a little lengthy one, but it's important for this episode because we're doing the first episode of the original series. Granted, it's not the first one that aired, but this was the first one that was technically shown, just not broadcast. And that's because a print of the pre-broadcast version of this episode was taken by Gene Roddenberry to the annual World Science Fiction Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. And he presented it to everyone that was there. It was 500 people. But someone wrote in the Star Trek.
That's a good turnout for a Cleveland science fiction convention pre-Star Trek.
And apparently this was the second showing to the public, because Harlan Ellison showed it at basically Comic-Con. It was called the San Diego Western Con 19, just a couple days earlier. And so this is from Alan Asherman, author of the Star Trek Compendium. He was among the audience at the Roddenberry screening, and he recalled, this is the quote I wanted to read: "There must have been 500 people in that audience. When the Enterprise hit the galactic barrier, 1,000 eyes opened wide. 500 respiratory rates accelerated with what wonderful pleasure that comes over lovers of all things when they see their favorite subject being treated well. If he, Roddenberry, could have read our minds at any moment during the screening, he would have been the happiest producer in the world. Here was a future it did not hurt to imagine. Here was a constructive tomorrow for mankind, emphasizing exploration and expansion. This was a science fiction television series we all wanted to see. We were extremely impressed." And there's more, but that's the main snippet I want to pull from it.
How many women do you think were in that audience? If it's more than 10%, I would be surprised. That weren't there to work. Like, I mean, like the ushers. Just curious to know. And my guess is very few.
I couldn't say. I was gonna. The part that responds to my heart is the idea of here is a future it did not hurt to imagine. I really like that. That's why. I don't want to speak for you. That's why I love Star Trek, though.
Yeah.
But the other part I wanted to pull out is there is sort of a religious sentiment to this particular passage, and then that's where the comedy comes in, because I'm pretty sure I remember a story of Gene Roddenberry and L. Ron Hubbard, at least, if not being friends, being contemporaries, and Roddenberry being a little pissed that he didn't think to turn Star Trek into a religion. when L. Ron Hubbard did Dianetics. That's what I kind of recall. And I have to admit, as being an obsessive devotee of Star Trek, yeah, I can definitely see the religious parallels and the crossover there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that passage jumped out to
Although
me.
I'm glad he didn't turn it into an actual organized religion, a la Scientology.
I'm with you on that. But I also think it was just important to pull that out for the first episode of the original series.
Wild, by the way.
Which sets sets the stage for everything.
Any regrets, Gene? Well,
Ronnie had a good idea, and I didn't. I didn't beat him to it. For me, obviously the original series is not, especially probably people our age, it's not their favorite show of the Star Trek shows. I would venture to guess fewer people are just watching it over the years now. It's not getting a new audience. It's so old, all that. But it really, the concepts and sort of the mode of it, like, has really, all the future iterations really just are built on this. And this is why I was saying in our initial episode, like, Star Trek is essentially its own genre. And it really does start here. It's not like they have to figure it out. They have to figure out sort of the intricacies or the idiosyncrasies of it. But, this episode is about them punching God in the mouth.
mm-hmm.
And that
literally.
That seems like a very big point for at least Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. One thing I want to say is, it's not a grade or a category or anything like that. But I did want to say, like, basically every Star Trek episode can be boiled down to these broad concepts of, what's the problem? Is it a God problem, a tech problem, a time problem, a space problem, or a people problem? And I'm sure that's basically what most genre is, but rarely do I think God comes into it.
Mm-hmm. A handful of times. Yeah. Or not like a God or godlike creature being.
And I think sometimes it even pulls that down from sort of an omnipotent force into religion, like organized religion, usually when I see it in drama. Anything else you want to add? Otherwise, let's move on.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Okay. And let's start off with great scenes.
I love space chess. They're in, I don't know, whatever. It's basically a bar, right?
The chess room.
Yeah, and they're playing chess, and then there's it's not real chess. It's like on different levels.
It's just 3D chess.
Of course. But and then like Kirk calls a woman Jones, but she's like, "My name is Smith," and then gives her a knowing look, and I'm like, mm-hmm. Yeah, and so like you get a little taste of things to come in the rest of the series.
Yeah, the chess scene to me was such a great encapsulation of Kirk's relationship with Spock, but also he hits the ground running as Captain Kirk.
Yeah,
right away we get it. He's concerned about the ship and the mission, and then he's kind of also he's holding Spock off with his free hand, mm-hmm. and he's concerned about something else. I love how he throws it back. Spock saying, one of your Earth emotions, irritation. And Kirk does the chess move, and he says, "Are you sure you don't know what irritation is?" And you get Captain Kirk all right away, right up front. And yeah, the 3D chess was a nice wrinkle as well.
And Spock being like, he should have played this, and he didn't. Someone else, was it Mitchell going like, "Well, yeah, that's obviously like."
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of. There's a good energy between the two of them, but then later, right after that in the turbo lift, when Mitchell comes in, there's like a really good, Kirk gives that, that thumb gesture across the throat when Spock steps forward in disappointment. I love that. That was a great opening scene. Next one I have is in sickbay after Mitchell's been shocked, after they've gotten out of the barrier, and it's a long scene and it has a lot of beats, and it starts off, I mean, the whole time Kirk's being concerned for his friend, his best friend. But it also goes through, we get a history about the two of them.
Yeah.
We get kind of the idea that Mitchell is a piece of shit.
Oh my God, he's such a piece of shit.
I think we can just say it. Gary Mitchell is a piece of shit.
Even before, as it turns out, just a bad guy all around.
Yeah, you know what? We jumped over the scene that really establishes it because but we'll go back to that in a
Yeah,
minute.
I have it in my my best lines.
We're probably
actually.
gonna we're gonna spend a lot of time, I think, on the of its time grade there.
Ugh.
But in this scene, we established their friendship. We established something that is, because this episode is not, it is and it isn't canon, because there's just a lot of stuff they hadn't figured out.
Yeah, like they're saying like they met at Starfleet and that Kirk was like teaching a class or something. Is that what like?
I could kind of believe it, Lieutenant Kirk, but also Kirk later in the original series was established to have been like the youngest captain, which would almost preclude him having a rotation teaching.
Being a tenured professor at Starfleet Academy.
Or even an associate, just, picking up a semester as part of his duty. It just doesn't seem, exactly. But I do think the idea that he was a stack of book with legs is something that sticks in your mind enough, and you see it enough with his command thinking and decisions, that it's kind of stuck. But it's also for the people that just want to think of Kirk as a hoe who bangs people, which I don't like. But, this episode invites you to kind of take it or leave it in a way with a lot of stuff. Vulcan or Spock saying that he had basically ancestral human blood when that gets changed. The idea that the Valiant crossed it over to the edge of the galaxy 200 years before the Enterprise doesn't work. Just a lot of little details like that. But just in terms of character, we've got this idea that, Mitchell basically observed Kirk as a nerd and then took a woman aside, probably a like an assistant that thought he was cute, and was like, well, if you want him and you want to marry him or whatever, here's all the buttons you have to press. He says he outlined her entire campaign. So,
like basically catfished him.
Yeah. And then Kirk said, yeah, that's exactly what it would be.
And to what end?
And Kirk said, I almost married her. Right. Well, now that I have watched this episode multiple times over the last several days, I don't know how intentional it was, but Sam Peeples is probably, I think he was a science fiction writer. A lot of the people writing early Star Trek, they were, writers. They weren't just TV writers. But you could certainly pull from that whole exchange this idea that Mitchell likes playing God.
Yeah, that like he enjoys playing with people as if they are pawns, if it's like a game. And there's a line later that someone's like, well, he's going to get bored with us.
Yeah.
Or tired of us. And when he does, then what's he going to do?
And so I just really like the scene because it seems like it is two friends. They're not necessarily being totally honest. I don't feel like they're probing each other either, but it's just kind of two friends talking. And then over the course of that, one of them realizing, something's going on here.
Yeah, and then like very quickly Spock, of course, is like, we should just kill this guy. And I would have killed that motherfucker right then and there when he was like, oh yeah, I had that whole relationship, I orchestrated it. The girl you almost married, that was me.
That's when you kill.
Gotcha. I mean, like it would no longer be a question in my mind. I'd be like,
My last point on the scene and why I think it's a great scene is the best pilots, even today, they have a straightforward plot, like a dumb, simple plot. A lot of the times you'd be like, it's someone's first day. You know what I mean?
They shot of water, yeah.
And they're stupid simple. And they also have a straightforward emotional journey. Well, they stay at the job. That kind of thing. And here I think in this scene, those two elements converge perfectly. The ship is in trouble, but the plot is about dealing with this deification of a crew member. And the emotional arc is Kirk dealing with that crew member being his best friend. It's well acted. I thought both of them did a great job. One of the things about it being in HD now is all the close-ups. You really are just staring at actors' faces. So you get to pay attention. And if you're watching on a giant TV,
which of course I always am.
So you get to see all the little turns and ticks and all that they're attempting to convey, or that's way too big because they're playing to a TV. And it's fun to do that sometimes. And for whatever reason, in this 1966 sci-fi TV pilot, I think it really, really punched, really landed well here. I have 3 other scenes, but I want to step aside and see if you have any other chronological after that.
No, they're not chronological, and I think I'll probably get to some of this later. But basically, just when Kirk kind of realizes that things haven't gone well, when they show up to what was like the mining planet or whatever, the automated mining planet,
Delta Vega.
Yeah, he tells Kelso that blow this whole fucking place up if Gary gets loose, basically. And like finally realizing, oops, I probably should have listened to Spock on this one.
Yeah, we missed our window.
Oops.
I like that. Yeah, I think once they get down to the planet, I don't think that the episode necessarily pops with as many great scenes, but there are great moments like that for sure. I think only because when they get him down to the planet, they're just basically putting him in the brig, and he's just talking. That I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you, and you have to kind of wait a little bit for Daner to turn and join him. But before that, there's by going to that moment, there are two scenes I had before that. I think the Mitchell and Daner scene in sickbay is good until Kelso comes in.
He's like, oh boy, what did I walk in on? Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a bad performance. It's just not it doesn't fit with the performance.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I believe I actually audibly laughed at that. It was so like jarring,
Yeah.
like whoa.
And
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, and this scene has her testing his memory, and that's one of the most passionate love sonnets of the past 200 years. Now, for some reason, even though I just watched it, I can't remember. Is that before or after he flatlines for her?
Oh, I don't know if it's before or after.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's beats in the scene, things that happen, and I think he opens it with an apology too. They're obviously attracted. It's interesting that she becomes attracted to him. That like the turn of the acting is that she's now because she has to be. But I just thought between the two of them, it was a well acted scene. Maybe all the particulars of it,
and she's also like very insistent that this is not dangerous.
Yes, that was the other.
There's no way. I'm a psychologist, and I know ESP is not dangerous. It can't possibly be.
That part of it's gonna slip into my of its time quality only because they both say that she's being hysterical and then not concerned enough. It's bizarre. And it's no wonder it's no wonder gaslighting is really a thing. This is like culturally institutionalized. Like she's bouncing back and forth in their minds, which is garbage. I still thought it was a good scene. The other scene that led to what you pointed out, I think the Spock and Kirk scene in the briefing room after everyone leaves is fantastic. The only thing that's missing, because they hadn't quite smoothed out all the acting and all that, is or the characterizations, is Spock doesn't say it's the only logical solution. He does say that he only relies on logic for his decisions.
Yeah,
that was the only thing to me that kind of stood out, as that would have been there in episode 4, if this had been episode 4. But other than that, Spock and Kirk saying like, can't you feel for a minute? And then Spock saying, we got these two choices. We can try to strand him, but you're probably going to have to kill him. And then the part that really defines Shatner as Kirk, or just Captain Kirk, the character, Kirk doesn't then just take a beat or two to think about it. As soon as he hits that mark, he immediately says, set course for Delta Vega. He makes a decision in the moment. And you can see he's like, man, I don't want to do either of those things, but I got to do something.
Yeah.
And so it was good. I think it really set their dynamic. Okay, so then after they get to the planet, and do you have one more scene? There's only a couple more scenes. Okay. Oh, you didn't like the showdown?
Well, I put that's under a different category.
Oh, I thought it was a great scene because it was what I said. It was Star Trek distilled to its purest form, punching God in the mouth.
Yeah. I enjoyed that scene thoroughly. I put that under best Trek tropes. There being a fist fight at the end. Yeah,
but for this one,
karate chops.
This one also has the other sub trope, but also this is all the first time they're doing it, where Kirk's after Daner's joined Mitchell and her superpowers, I guess because she's a woman, or they took some time. You just had to read what was on the screen. Or maybe she even mentions it, that Mitchell's Esper ratings were actually higher than hers.
Oh,
so
okay.
That was how they were setting it up there. But yes, this is a pretty dense plot in a lot of ways, or pilot. But I like the idea, he's showing her we can remake this world and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, go to Kirk, go and see him, and you'll see how small he really is, and none of this matters. And then Kirk tries to appeal to her humanity. He says, be a psychiatrist for 1 minute more. What's your prognosis for someone like for someone like Gary Mitchell, and then uses that later in the fight where he's like, do you think he's going to share being a god with you? Like
Yeah,
how
no.
as he's getting his ass kicked, he's still like looking to him going like, do you see? This is going to be you. And I think that's pretty classic Star Trek, appealing to someone's humanity. I also think it's the one idea, it is the one big idea that strands Star Trek, the entire concept in the late 20th century, because I don't think Star Trek is capable of dealing with the concept of what if someone doesn't have a base humanity to appeal to?
Yeah.
And I think that's tough. I think antagonism, having your villains be more antagonistic or having their own point of view or reasons for doing something is kind of born of the idea that people have thought things through to some degree or have their own logic or reasoning for doing things. But I don't know. The world I live in seems like people don't think much more beyond I'm afraid.
Yeah. And there's also just like plain evil people too. Like, why is Gary Mitchell such an asshole? He's just like a born asshole.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into why is Kirk then, does that make Kirk a jerk too? Because they're just two bros broing out. And
No.
I don't know, I could see that they were basically, they probably got along and they were complimentary because maybe Kirk, maybe not the submissive one, but you know what I mean? Like he's not as jerky as Mitchell. So he's whatever, and they have good fun. But also I think once Mitchell saves his life on Deneb 4, that kind of bonds them in a different, interesting that Deneb 4 is then also the planet that they're going to in Encounter at Farpoint, which we're doing later. But something I had missed many times. But yeah, Deneb 4. But I think but to me, I was trying to understand, like, well, does it track? Does that mean Kirk does have this side to him? Because I'm not a believer that Kirk's just a hoe and has no respect.
I don't think
for
he's
people.
just a hoe. I think he enjoys I think he enjoys adventure in all its forms.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. And sometimes I think
and an exploration in all its
but
forms.
Gary Mitchell likes manipulating people.
Yeah, he just like a hedonist or something. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that we talked about the great scenes. I think there are quite a lot for a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, best Trek tropes.
You know what? We had a red alert immediately, which I love it. We talked about last episode. I mean, this one because it's the pilot. I feel like I'm giving it the best Trek trope because usually it does bother me, but because it's the pilot, I'm giving it a slide, and I'm letting it slide, and you have to like have it to like set it up as like this is what happens when bad things. Like this is how you know things have gotten bad.
Also, I think it's they only really use it that one time, so it doesn't like come back.
It wasn't like
Yeah.
It didn't lose its effectiveness. We found out what it was for, but it was pretty immediate.
So I have evil gods, but you said basically, should be evil gods or punching a god in the mouth or reasoning a god to death.
Like they have all these sophisticated weapons, but the end of it is fought as a fist fight with karate chops and pulling rocks onto somebody, and I love it.
Also, in the scene where right before they take him down to the planet, when he shocks Kirk and Spock in sickbay, he starts sort of like bloviating so much because remember he can read people's minds. He literally just read what Spock was thinking, but then he gets up and starts speaking in this grand tone, and Kirk just knocks him out. Remember he punches him under the bed. He goes, "I want him unconscious for a while."
Yeah.
I put this in the wrong section. So, okay. So I put the negging of women. That's the worst Trek trope. So.
Yeah. Can you believe it? Abroad in the workplace?
Let's put a pin in that for just a second because I want to find one other one. I just think Spock, or having the voice of reason that's purely logical in the way that you maybe don't want to hear. It's not a Trek trope, but the fact is that so many episodes, it's not strictly a Trek trope, but I don't know a lot of shows where the other point of view that is the one you don't want to think about is given equal weight. I think that's maybe it. And then the other best Trek trope is, you already said this, chess.
Yeah.
To me, it stands out as being a great Trek trope because Star Trek embraces intelligence, intellect, and chess is, at least in the 60s and even kind of now, it's high-minded. It's you're a thinking person. You're considering the options,
and
you're
it's strategic.
If you're playing chess, there's a lot of good things going on. So
yeah.
I'm terrible. By the way, I'm terrible at chess. I'm a dumb idiot.
I'm pretty bad at it, and every time I would try to, like, I know how to play, and so I've taught some people how to play, and they just end up being so much better at it than me.
Well, they made that battle chess computer game, and that was to me the only thing that got me to try to do chess, because it was like Mortal Kombat but a chessboard. So every time you'd move and take a piece, they would actually like instead fight and kill each other. The one, and then if you did whatever, depending on the move that you did, the winning piece went. So that was cool.
Well, had I like actually known that you can study chess and there's like certain strategies and moves that you can do, like tic-tac-toe, I probably would have been much better at it.
Yeah, this is not an invitation for anyone to get me a 3D chess set. I don't want those. That's
God, no.
They're super expensive, and although it would be fun to watch my cat jump on the different levels, so I don't want them. Okay. Worst Trek tropes.
So I think the early show does this a little bit more than the later ones, but I understand why they do it. But they have like a full screen of like the bridge to the briefing room or to sick bay, but like the angle is kind of weird. And that, like, why would you have like some kind of camera or monitor right there?
Oh, okay. I'm confusing two ideas. So, I see what you're saying. No, it's the same thing. Why is there cinematography for those shots?
Yeah.
Yes. Why is the camera where
it should just be like a wide shot of the whole room, right?
Yes, exactly. They never figured that out. And then sometimes on view screen conversations in like the Next Generation, there's like a camera move that happens. I'm like, wait.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And like there's a part where I mentioned this in another category, but it's okay. But like when Mitchell's in the sick bay, he looks like directly at the camera, and like
he's supposed to.
I know, but like they're like monitoring him, and he looks right at the camera, and they're like, "Oh boy, oh, we're caught!" Like, oh, he knows we're looking at him. Like, yeah, he knows. There's a camera right there, but why is it pointed at this person's bed? And like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
like you can't, like if you're in sick bay, you don't get any privacy. You have to be monitored by the captain 24 hours a day. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Or at least the camera could be near that water spigot.
Yeah.
Something Spock
I love those cheesy like practical effects too, of like the cup floating over, like on Bewitched.
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote about, what is it, the Cool Ranch Doritos, like a peasant child couldn't handle the flavor of a like 60s TV audiences. How are they moving that cup?
Oh.
One of my worst Trek tropes. This is, by the way, I'm kind of filibustering until we get to the sexism, because it's going to smash us right into the most of its time quality. But that's just a little procedural note there. So there are two examples, but they're kind of one and then like a subcategory of it, and that is calling things that we know by their space version. So he says Caffarian apples, and I am not a fan of like the wombats of Domingus 2 or the Rigelian bat. I don't like when I've never ever liked when Star Trek did that. In Deep Space Nine, Klingon coffee is not called Klingon coffee. It's called Raktajino. It just has a name, and you're just supposed to know what it is. And so Caffarian apples, okay, what does that mean? So to me, it's like cheap exoticism or like cheap futurism, just to remind you that we're dealing with space. And on that line, they got away from this, and that was probably a good call. Although it'd be funny to see it come back and for them to try to have slipped it in or find different ways to kind of do their own slang. But, when Gary Mitchell refers to a woman that was like a firebrand, because Kirk says, I haven't been worried about you since that woman on One Planet. And Mitchell chuckles and goes, yeah, she was a Nova, that one. And it's like,
what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I didn't just pay 5 cents for a science fiction reader. Okay. So it's not something they actually really did. I don't think after the even like the first 5 or 10 episodes of the original series where that stuff would slip in there. And definitely Next Generation, Rick Berman was very clear on like, this should just be like basic language that doesn't really age.
Yeah.
I guess when it's a term we know, I think that's what it is. When it's a term we know with sort of a modification that we recognize, then it doesn't seem futuristic. It just seems cheap. And so it just bothers me.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, should we get into it now? Let's just get into it. Okay. I don't think it's any surprise that 1966, the TV show is going to have some sexism in it. And I don't think Star Trek, that if you're thinking about Star Trek, that sexism is low on the list. I think it's pretty high on the list of things that immediately jumps to mind about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, this episode in particular is nasty. It's nasty. Yeah. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, there's a line in there that says, with almost 100 women on board, like, how many people are on board? Like,
well, in the original run, it's like 450 people. Yeah. So a quarter of the crew is what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like stuff like that. And then like, it's just like everyone, like there's always just a comment about, can you believe it? We got women in the workplace here. Then like someone grabs a woman's hand because like the bridge starts blowing up. Like, oh, it's okay, dear.
So Gary Mitchell is navigating the ship.
Yeah.
He's the navigator. Now he's not the helmsman, so he's not like actually piloting. But he's doing a lot of other things besides navigation.
Sitting in front.
They're in a crisis. The ship is being mangled by this, getting its ass kicked by this magnetic storm. They need to get out of it.
And like shit is blowing up on the bridge.
And with one hand, he's manning his station. The other one, he's manhandling.
He's comforting a lady.
Yeoman Smith, yes. And this is after when he meets Elizabeth Daner, who introduces herself as a psychiatrist who's studying the reactions, crew reactions to stress. It's just like kind of of course, what else is she going to do? So that's kind of a
lady doctor.
Yeah, a lady doctor. And she explains what she's doing. And then she says, I would also be interested, if we have the records, of knowing how the Valiant crew handled their stressful situation, which is, again, kind of an odd thing to say because we just heard that they all killed themselves. But anyway, but Mitchell's response to hearing what she does is he says, improving the breeding stock, are you?
Yeah, it's gross.
it's like, whoa. And then she goes, which she has to like drop her professionalism, I guess, to respond is, I hear that's what you do, including the line. And then that's it. And then she kind of walks away. And then he turns. So he's been bested. So his ego's been hurt. So he turns to Kelso and he calls her a walking freezer unit, which gets a reaction on the rest of the bridge. Dr. Piper and even Scotty and Sulu, they all like make faces. Piper, of course, looks at her and he's like, haha. But then Scott behind him, this is probably why they kept Scotty. Scotty's like, that was not right. That was Gary Mitchell's a piece of shit. I hope he dies. Yeah. And Sulu's like, I'm just happy to be here, but that was not right. That was not right.
Yeah.
I'm going to dig a little deeper here with two things. They're both asking Daner's opinion. She gives it, and they say that's not good enough, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's kind of written in a way where she's like, but he's not that dangerous. It's like she just has to keep saying that and shaking her hair. It's sort of,
yeah.
It's kind of, we've forgotten what she's supposed to be doing here, which is studying, you know what I mean? She's not on her character. She's not studying the stress. That's why I like that scene in Sick Bay between the two of them, because then I'm like, I can actually buy that she's examining him. That actually makes sense. But when she's talking to Kirk and Spock, even Spock's giving it to her. A character they hadn't figured out yet, obviously.
Yeah, but yeah, so like what she's saying like makes sense if you have never seen Star Trek, though, like, or science fiction or whatever. Like, it's like, yeah, of course. It's just people who are like little, like, in real life, you can't become a god from this.
Right. Or just sort of if she just wasn't paying attention when Spock was saying what was happening on the Valiant.
Mm-hmm. Well.
Yeah, she's like, oh, they all killed themselves because of Esper craziness? I'm sure that's not related to our situation whatsoever.
No, not at all.
Nothing at all.
Coincidence.
And I think there's a line that says women professionals do tend to overcompensate. I think she says that.
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah, I remember someone saying that. I'm like,
that's more of its time quality that I had under. So I just want to get to the well, that's what we're in right now. But I want to get to the most disgusting. This is by far this is what our show does. That's a little bit different from the other shows. We are going to jump back and forth when it suits us to talking about it from sort of the production element of it, because can't help it, and whether people want to believe it or not, it can very much influence what you see on the screen. But that casting of that Yeoman Smith. So that is not a recast. It's like the other things. It's a new character, because in the Cage there was a yeoman too, and it was a redhead, and they very much sexualize her but she has lines. So this one, she doesn't have lines. I don't think she has a line. Oh, she has that one line where she says Smith.
It's Smith, yeah.
Okay, so Andrea Drom replaced Laurel Goodwin in the role of Captain's Yeoman, according to Herb Solow and Bob Justman. Herb Solow, I think, was the network executive, and Robert Justman, is the producer. He was the day-to-day producer. Her role was actually, quote, a non-part, and Roddenberry claimed he cast her so he could score with her. This is a quote, score with her. They added it was not just a, quote, non-part, but a, quote, non-score as well. Drom didn't return to the series and was replaced by Grace Lee Whitney as Yeoman Rand. And what happened to Grace Lee Whitney that's its own podcast, and it's disgusting and it's terrible.
Oh God, I don't know. Do I even want to
know? Not by anyone on the cast, but it's just gross. So gross sexual. It's you can't detach it once you know the history, and it's, in 50 years they're going to be looking back at the things we're doing now and like, oh, podcasting. Well, yeah. That's so, disgusting, but we can look at it now and say it was, it was disgusting for its time. And I'm going to give you the clue, because when Gary Mitchell makes a sexist comment on the bridge, some people react like that's a sexist comment.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew it wasn't like, oh, that was just the time. It was just that there was more of an insistence of putting up with it that was more accepted. I think that insistence still survives to this day, right? But there's less tolerance for people insisting, I guess. But that was gross. We had to point it out. Most of its time with an original episode of Star Trek is probably going to involve sexism. Well,
yeah. I do have some things that are not sexism.
Okay.
Shockingly. So I put polyester knitwear. Everyone's wearing polyester knitwear as their uniform. So it's, if you're unfamiliar, it is essentially like a knit sweater made of synthetic fabric. Yeah, no, that it's just something you would not wear today, because it would feel you'd be under those lights. You'd probably feel like you were dying.
I wonder if stages were as cold as they are now.
But the lights were so much stronger.
You're 100% right. I'm saying like the lights were even stronger. So were the stages cold at all?
I think it was just the same thing where like they crank up the air conditioning, then when they start to shoot, they turn it off right before they shoot.
Yeah, but those lights absolutely are just burning.
Like now you don't need as crazy like the lighting on a television set. I guess maybe there's some 3-camera sitcoms with a live audience that have that crazy lighting, but most of it is nothing quite as extreme as was on those early shows. There's also a painted styrofoam cup when Gary Mitchell's able to grab the cup and send it across the room. It's painted. and that's just like, why?
Okay, now that you mention it, I have a thought. And maybe it's a dumb thought. Were paper cups in a lot of use then, or was it largely styrofoam?
No, there was paper cups, but styrofoam was considered like because it insulated, so you can keep your drink colder. And we didn't care about the earth as much. Not that we care that much about it now, but
I'm sure that was lead paint as well. So.
Oh, well, yeah. I was wondering like how they like what kind of paint they must have used to keep it on there.
It probably was just a paint on a paper cup, because what else are they going to use? They're not going to go to the printing shop and just print it.
They absolutely.
So they probably just had to paint it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Painted cup. That spigot was certainly the water spigot. Yeah. Certainly 100% of that time. The dials
was like a glass water cooler or something. Yeah. With those cone cups.
The phaser rifle.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
the phaser rifle.
just the conception of what a phaser rifle, a futuristic laser looking rifle would look like, would definitely be that. Yeah, those are good ones. Now it's time for the line must be drawn here. Great lines.
We've already talked about it, but I almost married her. Like Kirk is genuinely like, wait, what? Her?
And you could
Like,
see the reaction. Yeah.
A non-marrying man almost married her.
You
son
nearly
of a bitch.
Don't you? I have this line in here because I love the way Sally Kellerman delivers it. By the way, I didn't mention this. Sally Kellerman passed away earlier this year. Rest in peace. What a
Did she?
long. Yeah, she died. She passed away in February. But what a long, successful career. I mean, and she made her mark. And for Star Trek fans of a certain age, I guess it was this. But for the rest of the world, there was a lot of other things. Gary Lockwood, by the way, Gary Mitchell, still kicking.
Great.
And I think he was in the large fan film that Snoop Dogg did with all the old Star Trek actors. Anyway,
just from this episode?
Yeah, I mean,
oh wow.
I mean, Gary Mitchell. How many of Kirk's friends have we met besides Spock and McCoy?
I guess 0.
Yeah,
that comes to mind.
I mean, he got more screen time than Kirk's brother, who died. And they cut the scene with his nephew. So it's like, okay. So Sally Kellerman delivering, "Don't you understand? A mutated superior man could also be a wonderful thing. But I think a mutated superior man could also be a wonderful thing." What attracted me? Like, that's
again,
a Star Trek
like I mean, part of it, I think maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like she's just like very horny for him and is like trying to make excuses because she wants to stay on this planet. Eventually, like at the end, she's like, "Yeah, I could stay on this planet and bang this guy."
I'm with you on that, but isn't that just a great Trek trope of being horny for science or human progress?
Mm-hmm.
Gary Mitchell says to Kirk on Delta Vega, "Command and compassion is a fool's mixture." I like that.
I also like, "You should have killed me when you had the chance, James."
I feel like we've heard that in other things. It's great.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's always great when it's in something. So, and also now it made me think, what's the most random place you could hear that in? Like an episode of the Babysitters Club. You wouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
He also says morals are for men, not gods, and I really think that is Gene Roddenberry's mission statement. In a way, when he deals with we don't need God, we have each other. Which I really do think, as like a near religious leader as Gene Roddenberry got, that he was, he kind of did believe in humanity or the human spirit. Any other great lines?
No. I mean, there are a lot of great ones, but those are the ones that I wrote down that I thought were particularly great. Yeah,
and I think it's just a really solid, well-written pilot. I mean, it's so good that Sam Peeples also was brought back to write the quote-unquote pilot or the first episode of the animated series, which is interesting. But yeah, it's good. Okay, now we go into the Anton Caridian Award for great performance. Best performance, greatest performance.
I'm giving it to Shatner.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like he kills it in this.
He is Captain Kirk from moment one.
Yeah.
There's not any part of that performance that he didn't duplicate, or, he sounds like, he acts like, behaves like, however you want to call it, Captain Kirk for the entire
he's
episode.
Been doing this for a decade.
Yep. And it's like he brought everyone to him. He's like, you guys figure it out. I'm going to be the captain of the Enterprise. You guys sort out what you need to do. The only thing, this isn't a tweak. What was funny to track about Shatner through the episode is his hairpiece did change.
Oh.
In the early part, it changes when he goes on the planet, is when I noticed. When he's definitely fighting Mitchell, that's a different piece than in like the first couples in like the early part of the episode. So I thought that was interesting. The high def is you can pick it out much more easily. So. I'm going to give a runner up to Gary Lockwood. I think one of the thoughts, or one of the parts that I really keyed in on, was that Mitchell was sort of astonished by his own transformation, and I think
Yeah.
he conveyed that pretty well. Also, and this is very important for me, great cup acting in the sick bay scene. Listen,
Great
folks.
cup acting.
Listen, folks. I'm not saying acting is easy. It's very difficult.
Oh yeah, I can never do it.
I'm not saying directing is easy either. It's very difficult. But there are times when you see something on camera that's wrong and it shouldn't be ignored. And one of those things is, if you have a cup that's supposed to have liquid in it, you treat that object differently than if it's empty.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time now, there's no consideration for it. Some of our greatest actors, Kristen, have been felled by the mighty cup acting. There is no liquid in that cup that Gary Mitchell orders with tap water, which if you're a god, okay. On the other hand, maybe a god saying, hey, water's important, drink water. So,
yeah.
It's not 100% perfect cup acting, because he's got to deal with the interaction with Shatner and all that stuff, and Shatner has to basically Kirk has to grab it away, and if there was liquid in it, it would spill everywhere. Basically, it's like if you've got liquid in there and it gets on something, then the spot doesn't dry in time for you to reset and redo the take. And I get why they don't do it, but that's why you're an actor. You got to act like there's liquid in there, and he did a good job.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, like, there's no liquid in almost any cup you see on screen ever. No. Unless it's a clear cup.
I've been watching The Patient with Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson, and
oh no, and it's that empty cup acting all around.
Domhnall Gleeson is the only one drinking. He's got like a Dunkin' Donuts coffee cup, and there's a part of me that's like, I can kind of buy it some of the time because he's like bringing it home from work, and so it's like maybe he's drinking the last of it. I can get it, but there are definitely other times where he's like, no. There's supposed to be liquid in there. And like, even when you drink, so it's hard because if there's not liquid in there, when you tilt it up to drink it, you're going to tilt it up differently with liquid in there than if there's not. So if you're faking drinking, even the way you put it to your lips is going to be different. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying we notice it.
And like the sound of it when it hits the table, like, so I watch a lot of soap operas, and there's a lot of bad empty cup acting because a lot of times you're dealing with people who are like brand new actors, and also there's only one take and they don't understand what they're doing, and it's pretty noticeable. Like, you'll see someone like try to make their coffee, but they put like 5 sugars in it into the empty cup and like stir it around, and there's nothing in there. You just hear the stir against the sugar in the side of the cup.
Yeah, so you can't hit the sides. You got to make that whole thing. Yeah.
But the dedication of putting the sugars in, I remember it was like so jarring. I was like, what are you doing? Don't do it.
That's great. That's great. There's like just a cup. There's just cups full of like other that cup's been used in other episodes, so it's just got all the sugar from the
cup all week. It's like filmed the scene in the coffee shop.
I was amazed. I was a page at CBS, and so working on the soaps, which is basically just sitting in the booth and answering the phone for like people going, when's my wife going to be home, or when's my husband going to be home, was always great. But I was always astonished how many pages they shoot in a day, and the ones that and the ones that had been doing it for a while, how do they memorize all that stuff, but just how like they know what to do. The directors were super great too, because they're like, there's no time for excess. We just got to do it. So that was a great efficiency machine. And in a lot of ways, Star Trek, we'll get into that in other episodes, but Star Trek had to sort of do some version of that too. And that was always interesting. So that leads us into the Shatner, and I'm going to jump right in. For this episode, it should be called the Nimoy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In all fairness to Leonard Nimoy, he had not figured out this character yet. And the writers hadn't quite either. So you had half an idea of what Spock is. He's an alien who doesn't have emotions. Or in this episode, they make it clear that he has different emotions, or he can like suppress them. So it's interesting that it kind of gets convoluted either in Star Trek itself or through fan reaction. Interpretation is like he doesn't have emotions. Like, that ever happened? No, he has them. He just can control them. But in this one, it's just the way he was doing it on the cage, which is like checking all stations. Just a lot of shouting and weird emotions, which he was like, I'll emote like an alien might, which is not how a human would. And that was the choice he made to get through it. But it all kind of calmed down for that briefing room scene, so it worked. But overall, I mean, he really went for it.
Yeah, I just gave it to Gary Mitchell, like, in toto. Like, he made some choices. I mean, the actor did, but like the character, I guess, yeah, like there's just like certain choices made for this character that were just kind of like, okay, all right. Like some of them's fine, but like, for instance, I already mentioned how he stares into that camera with his creepy space eyes, and then he pretends to die, or he changes his vital signs and quote unquote dies, and he just like drops his head against the pillow. Just like stuff like that. I was like, okay. And then like at the end, when they're just like rolling around, William Shatner and sorry, I forget the actor's name. Sorry, are just rolling around in the fight. I'm like, there's certain like pieces of that set. There's like, we're just gonna keep going. Like, yeah, we're just gonna go with it.
All right, that's good. They had those were contacts, so, and apparently very painful to wear.
I was thinking, I was like, these have to be so freaking painful, like hard contact lenses back then that made your eyes look like that. Ugh.
To the point where I'm like, did they even wash them? Because it seems like washing things, rinsing things off was not a thing in the 60s.
Oh God, eye infections.
Exactly. All right, that leads us into our thought experiments. What part of this are they teaching at Starfleet Academy?
I just put ESP. I don't know, like just. I mean, the whole thing, I would think. Like, don't fly to the edge of the galaxy because this is what happened.
So stay away from the edge of the galaxy. Okay. Yeah. All right. I like that one.
And also be careful because your students might try to catfish you. Like, that might not be a course they're teaching, but certainly going to be like a memo to the faculty, I would think. Like, don't date the lab techs.
Right. It's a big galaxy, folks. There are plenty of options.
No fraternizing between student and instructor.
That's a good one. So that's like, what is HR teaching at Starfleet Academy? Essentially. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
The training.
Yep.
The faculty training.
Now
videos.
we're gonna. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now this runs into what we ran into with Strange New Worlds, I think. How would the predecessor show Captain resolve this conflict? Well, technically, there is no predecessor show Captain, but also technically
there is.
So how would Captain Pike have resolved this issue? Well, it depends, because the Hunter Pike doesn't seem like he has any friends. And the Anson Mount one seems like he's friends with everybody. So it kind of whittles it, like it makes the emotional conflict a little stranger.
Yeah, I put that he may have listened to Spock earlier about killing him.
And well, the other thing is, I have a hard time buying that relationship's the same. That, Anson
no, of course
Mount,
not.
Yeah, Captain Anson Mount Pike does not need, and he doesn't need anyone directed at him, because it would be indistinguishable from all the people naturally flocking to him.
Yeah.
I can buy Shatner as being a little nerdy and shy. That I can definitely do. And I can buy Anson Mount being a little shy, but he's just so big that I just don't think.
Is he actually big in real life?
I think he is. He plays on screen as being pretty large.
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
Well, I have a good eye for this.
I have to look this
All right,
up
let's
now.
see this. Hold on. Let's do this. Anson Mount height.
And it better be like a reputable source.
Okay. Well, I'm just using Google. So,
like, I want to see a picture of him next to Elizabeth Debicki.
Okay, so it's that is the good.
Who is 6'3".
Sure. So Anson Mount is allegedly 6'1", but I'm saying more like 5'11". William Shatner's 5'10". I've stood next to old William Shatner. I didn't even get into all that about my experience, like meeting William Shatner and hearing, working with him or working for him, and having him say my name. I mean, that was great. It's just like
Bryan.
Yes, Bryan. Yes, it was great. I guess they're kind of the same height, but I think even though Shatner as Kirk carries himself a certain way, I think Anson Mount is just kind of a nice big presence. I don't know. So how they resolve the conflict? Do you think he would have listened to Spock right away?
Maybe not necessarily right away, but sooner.
I kind of think that the whole crew would have tried to get him to see the error of his ways, and then it wouldn't have just been Pike on the surface. It would have been like the whole main cast.
Oh,
and
probably.
they would be taking him on, and then somehow there'd be like whatever his emotional connection is with like La'an or something is like causes an emotional breakthrough, and he realizes that he has to kill himself.
Oh boy,
That's how I imagine it going. Because
that's bleak.
Yeah, I would say that feels more of the modern shows, but I also have a hard time picturing Pike just killing his best friend. I see him making.
Well, I don't think he'd do it himself. I think Spock was more than willing.
Yeah, maybe that would be the episode, though. It's like the first and last episode of Star Trek: Changing Worlds, where Pike just like Reichenbach falls and Sherlock Holmes. They just jump off the cliff together, and that's it. All right, so then that leads us to Trek, Marry or Kill.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll say Trek.
I mean, it is the horniest episode.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Is it the horniest episode?
Or you said you forgot how horny it was.
Yeah, like, I think upon, like, rewatching, I might change my mind about the horniness, but I think that this is just a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, I think that's where I landed too. I would say if someone ever wanted to check it out, go through the Marys first, but this one would probably be high up on rewatchability.
I mean, it's entertaining.
Yeah. That was Where No Man Has Gone Before. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with an all new episode.
Smell you later.
Smell you later.
Enterprise log, Captain James Kirk commanding. We are leaving that vast cloud of stars and planets which we call our galaxy. Behind us, Earth, Mars, Venus, even our sun are specks of dust. The question: what is out there in the black void beyond? Until now, our mission has been that of space law regulation, contact with Earth colonies, and investigation of alien life. But now, a new task. A probe out into where no man has gone before.